This is the Money Talks podcast. Subscribe now on iTunes. Listen to Michael Campbell and Money Talks live on the Chorus Radio Network, Saturday mornings on CKNW Vancouver, AM 770 Calgary, Shed 630 in Edmonton, and live on the Radio Player app.
Listening to Money Talks. My name is Mike Campbell. Money Talks is brought to you by Solera Club. Solera Club is a royalty-based investment, meaning you get paid first. It's in the tech sector, and it has no fees attached. For more information, go to soleraclub.com. That's, of course, the title song to the best-selling album of all time, Michael Jackson's Thriller. Do you know? Released 35 years ago this week. It was released November 30th, 1982. We'll have more from Thriller throughout the show, but first, today I'm going to start with three subjects that politicians hate: demographics, technology-related job losses, and unfunded liabilities. It doesn't matter. You can listen to provincial elections or federal elections, city council, school board elections. You won't hear a peep about those issues, despite the fact that those three areas are going to profoundly change society, the economy, and politics. I mean, we're already seeing it with technology-related job losses, especially in manufacturing in the U.S. Donald Trump won the presidential election with a huge push from laid-off manufacturing workers in blue-collar states like Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, which traditionally had been voting Democrat. But Hillary Clinton and the Democrat elites didn't even acknowledge the job losses. She didn't campaign there, and they lost. On the other hand, Donald Trump talked about the job losses, although he didn't have a clue why they occurred. He blames NAFTA and specifically trade with Mexico, despite the evidence that shows that over 75% of the losses are due to technological change. But this is just the beginning. Failure to prepare for the massive changes to specific job categories is going to result in literally millions of jobs lost and people permanently unemployed. I find it absolutely incredible that self-described champions of the working class, those politicians, special interest groups who can't wait to tell us how important they are to the working class, or the self-described champions of the middle class, refuse to even acknowledge what's going on. We saw this in late November. Volvo announced that it was delivering 24,000 self-driving cars to Uber in January 2019, just over 12 months away. And yet somehow we can continue to pretend there'll be no job losses. A report issued just yesterday by leading global consulting and research firm McKinsey estimates that technology is going to impact 375 million jobs in the next 12 years. Their worst case scenario is 800 million. Reports on Canada suggest 7 million jobs are going to be impacted. Now, don't get confused by this. So let me reiterate. There's going to be hundreds of millions of new jobs created due to technological change. Some in areas we don't even know yet. They haven't been invented yet. But there's going to be massive loss of jobs in specific industry categories like manufacturing, transportation, certain retail jobs. Those are the people I'm worried about, which is why I find the lack of political leadership so appalling. I mean, I got to admit, nothing gets me going when I see more reports like the Volvo one when I say it's coming. I've been talking about this for 10 years, hoping that someone would catch on. Well, we are 10 years late in preparing our children with the skills needed for the job market of the future. More immediately, we need to prepare current workers with the skills necessary to transition to new jobs, new job skills. We need a massive focus on adult education and retraining on an unprecedented scale, yet it rarely gets a mention. Instead, the suggestions you'll hear, you just wait, when the layoffs become too big to ignore, is to put people on EI and welfare. Now, they may call it guaranteed income, but it's going to amount to the same thing. The push won't be to help people transition. Instead, it will be to make them dependent on the state, which is freaking pathetic. There's absolutely no excuse for ignoring the massive changes to the job market caused by technology. And the result is going to be a boatload of hardship that could have been avoided if there was any foresight and leadership. It's the same problem with the unfunded liabilities for public sector pensions. You never hear any of our political elites talk about it, despite the massive financial implications. I mean, Finance Minister Morneau was chair of the C.D. Howe Institute when it issued a report that estimated the unfunded liability of public sector pensions at the federal level is between $150 billion and $244 billion. Now, the number swings because it depends how well the underlying pension investments do. If the rate of return on the pension investments are low, then that unfunded liability number that the taxpayers, you the taxpayer, are on the hook for, gets higher. This is why it's so ironic, by the way, that organized labor and others on the political left work so tirelessly to reduce the rates of return on private sector companies that the pensions are invested in. Now, maybe they don't have a clue. I don't see any evidence, actually, that public sector leaders or the executives of the Canadian Labour Congress, provincial bodies like the BC Fed, has a clue about economics and finance. Not one iota there. So maybe that's just ignorance, but they are working hard to prevent workers from getting their pension. And that brings me to the financial impact of the aging population on economic growth, healthcare costs, and government expenditures with senior programs like old age security. There's no debate on this. There's tons of studies concluding the same thing. Canada is not prepared for the financial impact of an aging population. I mean, there's no doubt that healthcare costs rise dramatically when people pass the age of 70, accelerate even more after they pass 75. I mean, we've been warned for over 15 years in literally dozens of studies that healthcare is unsustainable in its current form, yet no meaningful changes have been made. There's been absolutely no political leadership which guarantees overcrowded emergency rooms, increased wait times. You wait, that's what the news reports will say. We'll wring our hands, isn't this terrible? Well, we passed our opportunity to avoid it. There's going to be massive pressures on provincial finances. And it doesn't matter who's in power. I mean, demographics is not subject to political ideology, which, by the way, may explain why people enamored with politics hate demographics, and politicians rarely mention it. It's outside the regular political game. So we can go ahead, ignore these issues, but the impact is coming, and it's going to be monumental. Money Talks is brought to you by Solera Club. For more information, go to soleraclub.com. Hey, I've got a great show planned for you. The guy who first mentioned, look at the cannabis sector. He did it at the World Outlook Conference 2014. Mark Levy is my guest, Timer Digest Timer of the Year, but so much to talk to him about. I got Mike Levy on deck here, going to chat a little bit about Bitcoin. I've got the greatest shocking stat about Bitcoin that nobody's considered. Well, maybe somebody did. I got the shocking stat from somewhere. But I've also got a fabulous shocking stat, a little fun one from the world of golf. I got a Goofy Award, I got Ozzie Jurek, I got Victor Adair. So much coming your way. I'm glad you're with us right here on the Money Talks Network.
I love you more than he. Take you anywhere. Well, I love you endlessly. Love it we will share. So come and
That is The Girl Is Mine. It's the first single, by the way, from Thriller. It was released in advance of the album. It was with Paul McCartney, recorded after Michael Jackson and producer Quincy Jones visited McCartney at his ranch in Tucson, Arizona. Big hit, though, made it to number 2 in the pop charts, number 1 in the R&B singles charts, but it was part of a collaboration that went on for several years between Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson. Speaking of Michaels, our own star, Michael Levy, joins me on the line right now. Hey, Mike, I think like everybody else, you must have been having a look at Bitcoin, and great to have Mark Leibovit on, who was his number 1 recommendation at last year's World Outlook was Bitcoin Trust, and you look at what's happened since then.
Well, Mike, it's just absolutely mind-blowing, and I've got to say it's generational for those of our generation, and I blanket you in that too. We're taking a look at this and saying, oh my gosh, like what is going on here? Though you did get the heads up from Mark, and a lot of investors got in early, but there's sure an inherent risk involved when you trade speculatively at these kind of levels. Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, was at $750 a year ago, and then through Tuesday, that's Monday overnight, Tuesday into Thursday, it breached the $10,000 mark. Remember, $750 a year ago. 10,000, went through 11,000 early on Thursday. And, I mean, Mike, you talk about those numbers, and then you take a look at, and that's up 1,000%, by the way, for the year, compared to the S&P up 17% this past year, the Dow up 21%, gold up about 13%. Those are all very notable, very positive numbers, and very positive for asset prices. But put that beside Bitcoin, and boy, what a bunch of underperformers.
A couple things come to me, though, and that is the challenge with Bitcoin. I've been asked a ton about it, in the last couple of months. It doesn't lend itself to traditional analysis because there's not a history of trading. We don't get the volume figures on it, which are necessary for sort of normal kind of assessment of this stuff. So that's what makes it difficult. And I think the other thing is we confuse it with the blockchain technology, which is it's founded on. The blockchain, I think, has got spectacular potential going forward. And that's translated to some degree. And then, as you know, Mike, once things start going up, its own momentum carries it. And I think what's nerve-wracking, as you say, if you're going to get into Bitcoin, you better get ready for $2,000 swings now, because that's what we saw intraday, both Thursday and Friday.
Well, what I find very scary, Mike, is there's some analysts and those who are promoting Bitcoin, and I use that word advisedly, are saying, well, you can buy it on your credit card. In other words, this thing's going up. Don't worry about it, and you can go into debt for it, but go ahead and buy it. But just think, just for a moment, those that got, and I'll use this word advisedly, sucked in at $1,135 and turn around, and in less than 24 hours, it's trading at $9,000, and then it finished the day or finished the week at $10,660 US. But the swings are going to be absolutely wild. And what really got to me, reading a Wall Street Journal article, and in the journal it said that Bitcoin could replace gold as an investment to hold when faith ebbs in fiat currencies. In other words, as a store of value. And I just said, whoa, wait a minute, where are we going with this one?
I would say but I think it's actually erroneous to say it's going to replace gold. I think both gold and some cryptocurrency, whether it's Bitcoin, could be the alternative to paper money. Both of them. I don't see why it would replace it. We both, because I think, our main thread on Money Talks is that we're going to have a loss of confidence in government and money will flow elsewhere. Let me just finish with this, though. Speculations can work out. So all I'm saying to people when they're looking at this is just know that level of volatility is inherent, and because it's a very illiquid market, and know that that you're speculating. Don't think you're doing anything else. And I am nervous when people borrow against their credit card, but the wild swings are there, and that brings me to another story, Mike. I wanted to get with you is look at the Dow too, though. It was unbelievable. Did you check it out when the news that Mike Flynn down in the U.S. had pleaded guilty to, his charge of lying to the FBI. I mean, my goodness gracious, that was movement.
Again, you have the Dow on just a vertical move. In other words, going up, 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 up. And when you have those kind of moves, Mike, then you also have the possibility of the market coming down almost equally or even faster than it went up, at least momentarily. And as you said, the Dow just trucking right along over 24,000. The news of Flynn comes out, and within minutes, the Dow dropped 358 points. Well, percentage-wise, it's just over 1%, 1.25%, 1.5%. But 358 is a big number. And, the repercussions to the White House had a lot of late-coming investors into the market, buying stocks, losing their nerve, and gold and bonds caught a quick bid as investors went to a bit of a safer place, a place to park their money. But, Mike, then there was a big turnaround.
And again, I'm going to come back to the World Outlook Conference, Mike, because Martin Armstrong has been on this for a number of years. And he, in fact, put out a report earlier this year called Trading a Vertical Market. Once we got through that 23,700 mark, look out. And it's going to be a fascinating time going forward. He'll be back, by the way, at this year's World Outlook Conference, and you got to hear what he's got to say.
Well, Mike, absolutely, but there is a lesson here, and I'm glad you brought Marty up, because if there's a market, he's nailed a few, but if there's a market that he's nailed in the last year, it is the Dow. Last few years, and that 23,500, as you say, over 24,000. But I think that investors should be just a little more careful this time of the year. You go into December, trading volumes drop off, and wilder market swings are very, very possible. Yeah. So you can see that the markets can swing and get ready for a roller coaster ride, as I say, particularly going into year end.
Well, that's why you'll be here with us, Mike. Go out and have a great weekend, and you'll tell us about it next week.
Yeah, I will, Mike, and you too.
Take a break, come back. I got some instant wisdom with John Cleese. Stay with me. November 30th, 1982, Thriller's Relief and Wanna Be Startin' Something was the opening track about LaToya Jackson and her troubled relationship with her sister-in-law. Time for instant wisdom. You know, one of the main characteristics of politics today is that extremism has gone mainstream. I mean, a kind of all or none or love it or leave it has emerged from both the left and right. It's a contradiction in terms, by the way, to say extremism has gone mainstream, but which brings me to this week's installment of Instant Wisdom, starring John Cleese, talking about the advantages of extremism. Keep in mind, he was the driving force for Monty Python. Here's the clip.
Seriously, though, we've heard a lot about extremism recently, a nastier, harsher atmosphere everywhere, more abuse and bother boy behavior, less friendliness and tolerance and respect for opponents. All right, but what we never hear about extremism is its advantages. Well, the biggest advantage of extremism is that it makes you feel good because it provides you with enemies. Let me explain. The great thing about having enemies is that you can pretend that all the badness in the whole world is in your enemies and all the goodness in the whole world is in you. Attractive, isn't it? So, if you have a lot of anger and resentment in you anyway, and you therefore enjoy abusing people, then you can pretend that you're only doing it because these enemies of yours are such very bad persons. And that if it wasn't for them, you'd actually be good-natured and courteous and rational all the time. So, if you want to feel good, become an extremist. Okay, now you have a choice. If you join the hard left, they'll give you their list of authorized enemies. Almost all kinds of authority, especially the police, the city, Americans, judges, multinational corporations, public schools, furriers, newspaper owners, fox hunters, generals, class traitors, and, of course, moderates. Or, if you'd rather be an extremist on the hard right, no problem, fine, you still get a lovely list of enemies, only they're different ones. Noisy minority groups, unions, Russia, weirdos, demonstrators, welfare sponges, meddlesome clergy, peaceniks, the BBC, strikers, social workers, communists, and, of course, moderates. And upstart actors. Now, once you're armed with one of these super lists of enemies, you can be as nasty as you like and yet feel your behaviors morally justified. So you can strut around abusing people and telling them you could eat them for breakfast and still think of yourself as a champion of the truth, a fighter for the greater good, and not the rather sad paranoid schizoid that you really are.
That's over 20 years old, and my goodness, it's hard not to say right on when he discusses that. That's John Cleese. I think it's a serious problem with extremism, but I love how he puts that. I got to take a break. I'll come back. I got Mark Leibovitz, though. As I say, this is the guy who I think he's first out of the block when it came to cannabis. 3 years later, people are sort of catching on at this point, but Bitcoin also with that. Plus, I just want to tell you this. I love my shocking stat this week. I actually have two of you. A mind-blowing one from the world of golf, kind of fun, and one about Bitcoin that I don't think anybody's thought of on this one, but it's really interesting. Aussie Jurek on the incredible devastation of the real estate market caused by the changes to these mortgage rules, with more to come. All of that is coming your way, so stay with us right here. You're listening to Money Talks on the Money Talks Network.